This is Aqara's new tiny valve controller T1. It's going to allow you to protect your home from water damage, but the way this one works is a little different than some of the other options in the market. So I wanted to show you this new product from them, what you get with it, and how you can protect your home. Let's give her. Hello Automators, thanks for tuning in again. I'm Brian from Automate Your Life, and my goal on the channel is to save you time and money on your journey to live smarter. Now, I want to thank the folks over at Aqara who did sponsor today's video. I love working with those folks because they don't even ever ask to see videos like today's before I hit the publish button, which guarantees you that it doesn't affect our content when they sponsor it. It just means they get this spot on the channel. So this video, it's meant as a guide to help you save your home from water damage. But of course, I'll use their product to show you how to do that. Now let me explain how this works before we get into what you get. This is a retrofit solution, which means you don't have to change your water valve, and you likely don't have to change anything about the way your home is. It fits over top of the valve that you currently have in your home, and it can turn 90 degrees in order to open and close any water valve. It won't work with all homes, so you'll see some of the specifications your home will need to adhere to. But once this is on your valve, you have a lot of different ways to control it. In general, people are going to use this on a little valve next to a tap, or in my case, the main water valve in my home to monitor any leak and to turn off the water so you stop feeding that leak. Once this is installed, you can use the little push button on here, or you can connect this to a Zigbee 3.0 hub from Aqara, and you'll see a couple other options later. That's where we start to get local automated control of your water valve. You can connect to push buttons that Aqara sells, or you can connect to things like water leak sensors. I'll explain more as we go, but that's the basics for how the T1 works. There's actually just a few things inside of the box. Now the valve controller itself, it's fairly small, and yeah, it's mostly white. You'll find some metal components on the bottom and a little bit of gray used throughout to showcase buttons and controls. Speaking of those controls, there's a control button on top that allows you to manually actuate the valve. And there's a reset button for getting this connected to hubs. We'll talk about those connectivity options later, but this is a Zigbee 3.0 device. Now you get 4 AA batteries in the box, and there's a compartment in the back of the actuator to place those into. That's your only source of power for this unit. On the other side, you'll find what's called a magic pair code, and you can scan that into Aqara's app to get this installed in that app. But you don't have to worry about that ever falling off because I didn't use it. Everything sets up fine. That reset button on the front gets everything done for you. Now the bottom of the actuator looks a little technical to people who maybe don't look at these kinds of things regularly. There's a spot for a nut and a washer. That's called the output shaft. The nut and washer are securing this other part that moves 90 degrees, and that's called the swivel arm. That's what you will be attaching to your valve handle, and that ultimately moves everything. The swivel arm that comes installed on the device goes over most North American valve handles, or at least all the ones that I've had in my last 4 homes. Now it looks fairly small, but it fits over many of the hand-turned valves you'll find in your home. There are a few other parts that come in the box for fitting over different styles of valves and piping, and that might fit the valves you have under your kitchen sink. The other components in the box are there to help the actuator stabilize by attaching to the piping near your valve. You'll find 2 different sets of mounting brackets and of course the bolts associated with those. Plus you'll find an Allen key and a black rubber gasket that you may need for getting those mounting brackets secured right to your pipe. The mounting brackets that make more of a circle are for what's called DN15 and DN20 piping. It basically gets you from about 0.8 of an inch up to about an inch in outer pipe diameter. So that's the outside here. The ones that look like a pair of legs, those are going to get you up to DN25 piping. And I'm betting there's a little bit of play in these specifications. So if you have piping that's slightly different, I think you can get something working. This is a pretty flexible unit. You just got to get it secured. That larger mounting bracket also uses this ring to get it fully secured on your piping. And other than that, you're getting a short manual. It gives you a QR code to scan, and then that lets you get to the full manual. And that's all you're getting in this box. So let's move on to talking about what's good and maybe what's not so good with the Valve Controller T1. And then I'll show you how you do the install and setup, and we'll walk through some pretty great automation options for you. I've used a number of Valve controllers in the past, and there are a few specifics about this that I think are really good. First of all, the ease of install and the relatively small footprint that this takes up is going to work in a lot of homes. I also think that the pricing is more in line with what a lot of people want to spend on something like this. And just by having this installed in my home, I did get a break on my insurance. A water leak protection system can save you from a lot of water damage. So, get yourself a number of sensors, which again are cheap, and this Valve controller, and you might find yourself saving some money every month on insurance. Now check with your insurance company on that though, but I did. For those of you who've watched us in the past, you might know my background is in both computer and electrical engineering. And so one of the things that I always dealt with in my past life was the control of big motors. Now, the moment a motor starts, it can use up to 6.5 times the power it normally does just to get it to start moving. That extra power draw can take up to a second, and it's a huge drain on things like batteries. It's a huge drain on the power grid as well. So if you're ever wondering why lights flicker, it can be things like that from a big plant down the way from you. Anyways, what I like about Aqara's design here is that they slowly ramp up the movement of the valve. It doesn't feel like much, but this saves a huge amount of initial draw on those batteries, and it actually means that they can use a smaller battery set. That's keeping the overall design of this unit fairly small, and it means it will run a long time on those batteries. Today, when I look at the Valve controller in the app, it doesn't show battery power in the main page. However, you'll find this option on the profile side of the app. And FYI, this is my battery power after at least 30 movements and over 2 months of having it connected in my home. Sadly, I can't create any automations based off of battery power, but the app will still let you know when you get low. The overall size and the draw on power is very different than a lot of the other units I've used, and I don't feel like this could ever break standard piping or even a connection on my plumbing, and I really appreciate that. They've kept this so that I think anyone could install it and not worry about doing some damage to their home. There are other units I've used that could probably drive at least a valve handle to a breaking point, and I don't think we need that for this kind of a unit. I do wish the control button would pause control in the middle of actuation. So again, I just want a little bit of extra control on this coming from Aqara. It's not a major, but there is a moment where you're hitting the control button to test if your valve will move correctly. And that is a little unnerving for people that haven't done this kind of a thing in the past. The extra mounting brackets, I think, are really important here, especially alongside this little rubber gasket. Now, I'm not actually sure we can call that a rubber gasket, but that's a separate story. All of these components feel really high quality. I like that they're gonna last a lifetime. They could have cheaped out here and they didn't, so I really like that. Maybe the biggest thing I like is the simplicity and automation and the effectiveness of that automation. I'm sure at this point, I've already shown you a few times, but The water leak sensor connectivity to this controller is happening inside of the main page on the device. So yes, you're gonna need a hub, and if you're using Aqara's, I'm always going to recommend the M3 hub because it enables some extra local automation options as well as some extra features. It's the best they have, and if you haven't seen our review of that, it explains some of the local connectivity options that it has over other Aqara hubs. After you make that initial connection in the app, you can pair up to 20 leak sensors. If any of them have a leak connection or they get touched by water, your valve will close. It's a completely automatic automation. You don't need to set it up. You just have to do that pairing. Now I tested that, and you will see that test right now with a number of different network situations. One of the biggest questions people will have is, what happens if the internet is out and we experience a leak? So I'm gonna go unplug my internet right now. My internet is offline. My Wi-Fi is still online. We'll test that after this, but let's do this. And there you go, with the internet offline, because both of these are paired to my M3 hub in my home, this works. Now it does say the network's abnormal, okay? Now let's see if our reverse automation works. We're gonna get this sensor dried off. There it goes. So this is the power of the M3 hub, okay? This is a really big deal. It's localized control, and that's going to be one of the most important aspects of any leak protection system like this. It has to work when the internet is offline. So I'm currently rebooting my routers. There should be no Wi-Fi signal available for me. So there's no network in my home other than a single network switch, but this won't matter for this test. There you go. So even with the network offline in my home, because these are wirelessly connected using Zigbee to an M3 hub, there is no internet, no Wi-Fi requirement, no network requirement. This is going to continue to work. And I just got it dried off and my other automation ran. That is really fantastic. This is gonna protect your home fully, no matter what. The only thing you have to be concerned about are the battery powers on these two devices. Let's get our Valve Controller T1 set up. Now you do need a Zigbee 3.0 hub from Aqara. There are a number of models. Today I'm using the hub M3. I've used the hub M2 before. You can even go back, I think, to the G2H, the G2H Pro, the G3. All those are good Zigbee 3.0 hubs. And you can check some others, but I think these days I would recommend a hub M3. Now we're going to look for the Valve Controller T1. I'm going to tap add. Now they want us to bind the gateway. What they mean by that is our hub. In order to do that, I'm going to install my 4 batteries. Then we should get some lights on top. Those are just 4 AA's. They came in the box, and now we're going to be ready to bind this. So I'm going to hit the hub M3, and now my hub just said that it's ready to bind. And what they say here is device has entered the network state. If it does not flash, so if it's not sitting here flashing, reset the device. There you go. The reset method would be to double click the reset button. There's more instructions on the page, but honestly, just installing the batteries like that and doing everything just like that, I didn't even need to press the reset button. We can rename our device and we can set the location it's in. This is inside of the Aqara app. You can create new rooms if you don't have it in the application already, or you can just pick one of their preset ones. So I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to create the mechanical room because that's where this is going. Now I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to hit next. You get what's called a home page, and you can place this device card on that home page. If you want to place it on multiple, you can do that as well. And this just gives you extra controls. You can do it later if you'd like. Now we have the device basically set up inside of the application. We can see the hub, and you want to check your Zigbee signal when you're close to where this is going to be installed. Because this is Zigbee and because mechanical rooms can be filled with lots of reflective materials, you could end up with some interference, okay? Metal, things like that can interfere with this. So you want to check that. But in general, if you have a hub good and close, like mine is a couple of rooms away, this should be just fine. You'll also want to check for new firmware and do quick updates of that before installing this on your actual valve. This is generally what it's going to look like. So we have a number of accessories that we got in the box, and you're going to want to attach those onto your valve controller, but not quite tighten them down fully. And we'll go through the full installation, at least get them ready, and then we'll get it installed. So let's go do that. Just gonna show you how these components go together. So what we're going to do is put one side through, and then this is going to accept our bolts. So eventually it's going to come through and go like that. We're just going to go through. We're going to come through here. Okay. And then this is an easy way. Just twist them on, get them started. You don't want this fully closed for sure as you go to do the install, but you want them on there so it's not falling apart, and just get them started. There we go. With this bracket, you're going to want to take it apart, and they did give you a tool here for this. So you want to open that up. Now I can feel it's completely loosened up, and now I have this so it can open. The reason I'm doing that is to get these on here. To check my orientation. No, we're gonna go the other way. And then, again, these are kind of receiving. So that's how it's going to go. Now I'm going to close this back up. I had to pull that right through, right out to get this to go in. And there is a little hook here. See that little hook? So you want to get it over to that if you can. Helps to push there. And then once it's through, keep it in there and start to get your screw back in. Okay, there we go. Took a bit, but there we go. Now on the back of the manual, I did find this QR code. So I'm going to hit on that because we need a little bit of help to get this installed and working. But you can get some help by watching the next segment here, as I'll show you how to get this installed. Aqara's manual states that this setup is going to be used for 1-inch diameter piping. I bought a caliper tool. You don't have to use something like this. So mine says 85 or 0.85 of an inch, okay? And depending on where you're going to actually mount will be the difference. So you can see that one's up to 1 inch. So I'm kind of right in between here. I could use this potentially, but I'm going to use this and we'll show you how this gets done. The other component you might have to have a look at is this one. So this came in the box, and if you have like a smaller valve handle or a valve stem, this will be what you'll be using. So the way that would work is you'd be taking, I put the extra nut on there, you'd be taking this off, and then you'd be getting that on and sticking that on there. So there is an extra option for you here. In most cases, this is going to work in a North American home, and this is generally how we're going to end up installing this. What you do have to test is the way this turns and the way your valve turns. So this is my closed position. So we're going to make sure that when I press the button here, that I have that same direction happening. If it's trying to go the other way, you've got to adjust the other way, right? You've got to twist this the other way. So now I'm going to place this on here. In general, you don't want to be on joints if you don't have to be, but you can see here with my installation, I'm not really going to have a choice. The one thing that does help in this case, if it's a little bit loose, you actually install this. I'm going to call it a gasket, but it's not really a gasket. Place this around, get on, and now you've got to tighten down these bolts and get a third over here. I'm going to get that as tight as I can and just start tightening it. Because the more this moves, the less likely it is that it's going to work. And you don't want to crimp your pipe or anything, so don't over tighten, but this little piece is going to help you to not crush your pipe a little. So now I'm feeling good. This isn't moving anywhere. And now when this goes to move, it should close. So we're ready to test. Now, one thing I'll tell you is this releases the pressure. Okay, so if this is turning, you've got a problem. I did find that this was a useful button to press then. Hey. Nice and smooth, easy movement. You can see a little bit of movement as it gets started. One of the things you do want to check, you don't really want this touching here. You don't want those two actually connected, but it might be very close. It might be touching a little bit. Here's a situation that I wasn't able to use the valve controller for, and I want you to know what it's going to work for and what it's not. Right here, I installed what's called the lever valve turner. This does work for that type of valve right there. So it actually fits really nicely on that, and it wasn't a problem. Where the problem does come in is twofold with the piping. So number one, you're not going to want to be on plastic piping in general. Okay, even if I place the rubber gasket on this, this will actually apply a little bit of torque as it's trying to turn, right? So this isn't a hard valve to turn, but to get it started is a bit of effort. You have the reverse, the equal and opposite force being applied the other way. So yes, it will turn it that way, but you might just break a piece of pipe like this. The other problem is that the diameter here is not wide enough for this to sit on there. So there's just a couple of situations for you that you're not going to want to use the Valve Controller T1 for. Unfortunately, just not going to work here. I'm going to show you some of your valve controller settings and just how to work with this device. It's a little different than a few of the other Aqara products. Now, I just went in to my Valve Controller T1. It's on the home board here. If you ever need to add that card, you didn't add it initially, you can just hit this edit button, add a card, and then select the device. Once you're good there, you hit save, and now it's on your home page. You can control the valve right here. You just hit that button. It'll go a little bit darker when you've turned off the water. And you can also go inside to see the control here, where we can hit the switch to turn off the water source and turn it back on. Now, the associated sensors, you can go into that. It's a 1 out of 20 right now for me, but as I add new leak sensors, they'll show up here and I can just choose those. And that creates that direct pairing condition where if any of those see water, it'll just turn off this. Now, I don't think the timer is going to be a really useful option for a lot of people, but you can see if you select a certain amount of time, this will turn off your water. So if you just want it running for a little bit, it's not a bad way to do it. Inside of the detailed settings though, we can get in and change the accessory name, the location, and we can look at some other information around it, including the firmware version, which you can go here, check, and hit that to check for an update. The device card is how it looks on your dashboard. So if you ever want to change how that looks, what it's named, what the icon is, this is where you come in for that. If you ever need to see whether or not it was open or closed, check in the logs. You can go through the different dates and you can see how many times it is actuating. You can see I've been moving mine quite a bit, and if you want, you can delete those logs. The other thing you might want to know is what automations and what scenes this has been associated with. A scene is just something you're going to generally turn on. You could turn those on using Amazon or Google. An automation is something that will run automatically. So you can see here, that is now a turned on automation. It's ready to run, and you can go in and view the details, or you can create new automations or scenes in that manner. I'll show you what the options are from an automation standpoint in just a bit. But probably the biggest thing that's important for this valve is getting that Zigbee signal to be at least good, if not in the excellent range. You can come in here and you can check how that signal is. You want that signal strength in this green range. You don't want it falling down into fair or poor. That could mean that this will not work. If you are having problems, move your hub. This is an important device, so I think it's worth moving your hub in this case. Now, the hub that you're using, you can tap on it here, but I actually think it's better to go into the hub from its actual page. Now you can do that here or through the accessories page, but this is my hub M3. You can see a lot of settings are here for this. Now, HomeKit, you can tap in there. This is the easiest way to start the HomeKit pairing process. You actually just tap up on Apple HomeKit to start that. One of the biggest reasons I say to use an M3 or an M2 hub from Aqara is because of the Matter Bridge feature. The Matter Bridge feature enables you to connect the T1 to many platforms and apps. See, when you look at the box, you think you're only getting to connect this to Aqara's app, Amazon, and Google. But that's not the case because of this specific Matter Bridge feature. By going into here, taking a few steps, I've been able to connect the Valve controller to Apple HomeKit, Samsung SmartThings, Homey Pro. I'm sure Home Assistant would work too, but you'll see later in the video how I also did some direct connections to many of those platforms using Zigbee. Either way, this gives you another option for connectivity to many other apps, and it's a big deal. These are fairly interesting with the T1. Now, inside of Aqara's app, you only have 2 triggers and 2 actions that you can take with this valve. Basically, you can check whether your valve is open or closed and start an automation off of that, or as an action, you can open or close the valve. It's probably the only automation options you're going to want, but I'd like a few related to like the battery. Whenever you add a new leak sensor to Aqara's app, you're going to want to head to the main screen and then pair that with your valve actuator T1. Once that's happened, if any of those sensors get water on them, your actuator will close the valve in your home. But what happens if that was a mistake, or you're having a problem with a sensor, or it was just a little bit of water you dropped on the unit? You might want your valve to open up automatically. Understand you're taking a little bit of a risk with this automation, but if you check this little button down at the bottom, you'll only have the valve open up one single time. So it'll open up and then it'll close. If there's more water going on your sensor, then it will not open multiple times. So I think this is okay to do, but it's up to you on your comfort level here. If you do get a leak sensor getting water on it, I think you want to know about that. Now, you're going to get an alarm notification out of Aqara's app. I like to make sure of these things and make sure that I'm going to see it in my home, even if I'm not looking at my phone. This automation is just going to make sure you're going to get another notification sent to you, as well as turning on some lights. Some of you will want to close your water valve whenever you leave the home, or maybe just when you're going to leave your home for a long time. This is a great automation if you have a vacation property. Aqara's app now has a geolocation feature. Whether you're leaving or arriving in an area, you could start an automation with that. I'm going to show you how you can do this in a couple of other apps in a moment, but this simple automation would close your water valve when you leave the area. Personally, I think it's probably best to do this kind of a thing with a push button on your way out the door. That lets you make this decision instead of automating it fully. Now, the wireless mini switches from Aqara are a great device to use for this kind of thing. You just set it up where you're on your way out, you press the button in order to actuate the valve closed, and then you can use a double press to open it back up. This is a great thing to put in an area like your kitchen under the sink. So if you ever see an issue, maybe your water leak sensor's not getting wet, you don't have to run downstairs to your main water valve. You don't have to find your phone to close this. You just press that button on the inside of your cabinet. Now, the box says that you can connect this to Amazon and Google. That's true. And it's going to happen through the normal integration methods that you'll use. So in Amazon and Google's app, you'll be adding the Aqara Home service, and then that will bring the Valve Controller T1 into those apps. Both of them allow you to create automations with the valve being treated like a switch. So that means you have triggers that are based on it being opened or closed, and actions that can open or close it. This isn't necessarily really useful with those apps, but there's a couple of automations that I've created with Amazon that might work for you. But with Google, the one interesting thing that happens because of the integration being done as a switch is that you can put the Valve T1 into the home and away routines in that app. Those activate when everyone's left your home or when anyone returns. It's going to be controlled based off of your family's presence. It doesn't say on the box that this is HomeKit compatible, but I started this section by showing you that it was. I'm not going to promise you that this will work forever because it doesn't say that on the box, but just using the HomeKit option for my M3 hub to be integrated into Apple HomeKit brought it into that app as a switch. That switch wasn't named Valve Controller T1, and it just shows as a switch. But again, I can toggle it, open or closed, on or off, and it's the similar automation options. You can use it for home and away routines, as well as a water leak sensor automation. For those of you who know the world of Zigbee, then you know a Zigbee 3.0 device can be paired to other hubs. So I thought I would test this with a few of the hubs that I have in my home. Now, smart things, I couldn't even see the unit. That's unfortunate. Habitat, I did manage to get this paired to, but I couldn't find a device driver that worked. I actually think that situation could change in the future. Homey, couldn't tell what the device was, so it just brought it in as a generic Zigbee device, but I was able to rename it and put a super relevant icon on the controller, and then I had triggers for opening and closing, and a condition for the status of the valve, plus I had actions for opening and closing it. Home Assistant had a very similar situation with all of those same triggers, conditions, and actions. Plus, I was able to see a battery readout. So there are quite a few options for you with Zigbee hubs, and I would expect a lot of Zigbee 3.0 hubs to be able to bring this product in and to treat it like a switch. Using the Matter Bridge feature, we can bring the Valve Controller T1 into many other Matter-ready apps in a local connectivity way. In fact, instead of using the regular integration methods we just spoke about, this would be my preferred method for both Amazon and Google's apps. It also lets you integrate the Valve into Samsung SmartThings, Homey, Home Assistant, Apple HomeKit, and I'm sure there are more apps that are ready for Matter. What you do is you head into your hub in Aqara's app and first make sure that your Valve controller is a child device to the hub. Then head back and find Matter. Tap into that and go into Matter pairing code. There you'll see a numeric and a QR code that you can use in your other apps. So here's me using that in Samsung SmartThings to add a new device. For me, I just paste that numeric code in, and everything that's available to be used by that Matter bridge comes into SmartThing. This will give you on and off or open and close options for your Valve controller. And since all of this control is happening locally in your home, you'll be able to use the T1 with all kinds of other leak sensors and still have it protect your home the right way. From my perspective, this is an incredibly simple and effective Valve controller that you can place all over your home and on most valves. It's definitely the easiest installation I have done with the easiest pairing of different leak sensors, and it's not an expensive device to boot. It makes this one an easy recommendation for me for most families who don't want to go deeper with a water leak management system. So check out the links below. If we have any coupon codes, they'll be there for you. For this solution to be really powerful for you, you have to start working with more of Aqara's products. You can use things like door locks, or you can use different sensors to control this kind of a valve. And you have to buy the right hub. So if you want to see our other reviews of Aqara's products, they're up on screen now. Check those out. Otherwise, thanks for watching today. And of course, live smart.